Let's be honest, we all want to know the secret to motivation, right? For ourselves, for our kids, for our teams. But what if the way we've all been taught to think about it, as something you either have or you don't, is just wrong? What if our go-to strategies for motivating people are actually making things worse? Well, let's dive in. I know, it sounds completely backwards, doesn't it? Our whole world is built on rewards, praise, and deadlines to get stuff done. But what the research shows is that sometimes this classic carrot and stick approach can totally backfire. And understanding why opens up a whole new universe for figuring out what really, truly drives us. So here is the fundamental shift in thinking we need to make. The old way of looking at it was like a gas tank. You were either full of motivation or running on empty. But the new view, which comes from something called self-determination theory, says that's not the right question. It's not about how much motivation you have, it's about the quality. What kind of motivation is fueling you? And trust me, that one little change makes all the difference. Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we'll touch on the classic distinction you probably already know. Then, we'll blow that up and look at the full motivation spectrum. After that, we'll uncover the 3 psychological secret ingredients that make it all work. And finally, we'll talk about how to actually use this stuff in the real world. All right, first up, let's start with the basics. The 2 big categories of motivation that you've probably heard of before, intrinsic and extrinsic. So intrinsic motivation, this is the good stuff. This is when you do something just because you love it. The joy is in the doing. It's that natural built-in curiosity we all have to just explore, learn, and have fun. The activity isn't a means to an end. The activity is the reward. Imagine a kid just tinkering on a piano. Nobody's making them do it. They're not trying to get a sticker or impress their parents. They're just playing for the sheer fun of it, out of curiosity for the sounds, or for that little thrill of figuring out a new melody. That, right there, is pure intrinsic motivation. And then, you've got the other side of the coin, extrinsic motivation. This is when we do something to get something else, a paycheck, a good grade, or maybe just to avoid getting yelled at. But here's where it gets really interesting. This category is way more complex than it looks. And that brings us to the real heart of this idea, the motivation spectrum. Because it turns out, extrinsic isn't just one thing. It's a whole range of different shades, and not all of them are created equal. So think of this as our map of motivation. All the way on the right, that's our gold standard, intrinsic motivation. But look at that whole huge section in the middle labeled extrinsic. It's a journey, moving from feeling totally controlled by outside forces all the way to feeling genuinely self-directed. Let's walk through it step by step. So on the far left of this extrinsic scale, you have external regulation. This is the classic carrot and stick we all know. You're doing something purely because of an external demand, to get a reward or to avoid a punishment. The reason you're acting feels like it has absolutely nothing to do with you. Let's jump back to our piano student. If they're here on the spectrum, they are practicing only to get that sticker from their teacher. Or maybe they practice just because they're afraid their parents are going to be mad if they don't. It's 100% compliance. There is zero internal desire. Okay, moving one step over, we get to interjected regulation. Now, this is interesting. The pressure has actually moved from the outside to the inside. You're doing it because of internal pressures, like avoiding guilt or chasing that feeling of pride. You've kind of swallowed the rule whole, but you haven't really accepted it as your own. So now our piano student is practicing because they feel like they should. A good student practices, right? They'd feel guilty if they skipped it. See the difference? It's still a feeling of pressure, but now it's their own inner critic pushing the buttons, not someone else. Now we're getting to the good part, identification. This is a huge leap. This is when you consciously recognize that an activity is personally important. You see why it's valuable, and you accept it as your own goal, even if the task itself isn't exactly a party. It feels much more like a choice. So our student, maybe they still don't love practicing scales, but now they do it willingly. Why? Because they've connected it to a bigger goal they actually care about, like being good enough to join their friend's band. They see the value, so they choose to do it. And finally, we get to integrated regulation. This is the holy grail of extrinsic motivation. Here, the behavior isn't just something you see as valuable, it's become a genuine part of who you are. It aligns completely with your core values and your sense of self. At this point, the student practices because being a musician is now part of their identity. They see themselves as a piano player. The act of playing is an expression of who they've become.
It's still technically extrinsic, they're working to get better, but honestly, it feels every bit as authentic and powerful as pure intrinsic motivation.
So the big question is, how do we help people move along the spectrum? How do we get them from that feeling of control to a feeling of choice? Well, that brings us to the secret ingredients, the 3 psychological needs. Think of these as the essential nutrients for high-quality motivation to grow. The theory says that all of us, no matter where we're from, have 3 basic innate psychological needs. First is autonomy. That's our need to feel like we're in the driver's seat of our own lives. Second is competence, the need to feel like we're good at what we do and can handle challenges. And third is relatedness, our fundamental need to feel connected to other people. When those 3 needs are met, we don't just perform better, we thrive. And this, right here, gives us a clear path forward. So for our last section, let's see how we can actually use this knowledge in our daily lives. It's all about shifting from a mindset of controlling people to one of supporting them, using those 3 needs as our guide. So here it is, the practical cheat sheet. You want to support someone's autonomy? Simple. Offer them meaningful choices and explain why something needs to be done. You want to build up their competence? Give them challenges that stretch them but don't break them, and provide useful feedback. And for relatedness, it can be as simple as showing genuine respect and care. When you focus on fueling these needs, you unlock that high-quality, lasting motivation we've been talking about. And this quote from the original researchers, Ryan and Deci, just nails it. The goal isn't to get rid of all extrinsic motivation. That's impossible in the real world. The goal is to help people internalize the reasons for doing something, to really absorb them and make them their own. Because when that happens, the action becomes truly self-determined. So let's wrap this up with the big takeaways. First, motivation isn't an on-off switch, it's a whole spectrum of colors. Second, even motivation that comes from the outside can become totally authentic and powerful. The secret is to create an environment that feeds our 3 basic needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. When you do that, you don't just get better results, you get people who are more engaged, more resilient, and just plain happier. And that leaves us with one final question to chew on. Think about your life. As a parent, a manager, a teacher, a friend. Where is one place, just one, where you can make a small shift today? A shift away from controlling an outcome and towards supporting someone's autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Because that one small shift could literally change everything.